Cocoa Beach is your ultimate Florida beach vacation. Pack your bags and open your mind. Adventure is calling from Orlando's closest beach. Cocoa Beach is Florida's secret gem that's got it all. It's the budget-friendly, retro-cool destination that families and surfers adore. Come soak up the sun and ride the East Coast's most famous waves. Start planning your one-of-a-kind getaway now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
Hello and welcome to History for Weirdos.
We're your hosts, Andrew
and Stephanie.
And each week, we're going to take you on a journey into the strange, obscure, and relentlessly entertaining corners of human history.
Now listen up, friends, because it's about to get weird. Welcome to episode 91 of History for Weirdos.
Welcome back, weirdos.
And happy Pride Month, everyone.
Happy Pride Month to everybody.
We are each going to be doing a Pride-related episode, and this week, it's your week, Andrew.
It is my week, and I actually really like my Pride episode.
Please tell us, what are you doing your episode on this week?
Well, there is a woman from ancient history who was one of the most fascinating figures just throughout like the classical period. Actually, technically saying classical isn't, in a very technical sense, isn't correct. She's slightly before.
She's before the classical period?
Technically, yes. She's in this weird kind of 200-year period where it's like sometimes lumped into the classical period, sometimes it immediately precedes it, depending on who you ask.
This is extra nerdy.
This is so nerdy. So her name is literally synonymous with poetry and passion.
I definitely know who this is going to be on then.
Yes, this person has created a persona of mystery that has intrigued scholars, artists, and poets alike for over 2 millennia at this point.
So they were really into branding way back when.
She was really into branding. Her personal brand was Chef's Kiss. So her name actually was even spoken with the utmost reverence in the halls of the Great Library of Alexandria.
Ooh,
she was a big deal.
That is a flex.
Yeah, I mean, which, the library inspired the quills of innumerable scribes and the hearts of countless admirers. So, I mean, it's a big deal. It really, truly is. So this woman's name, do you want to say it?
Sappho.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's Sappho. So to truly appreciate the life and legacy of Sappho, we must first be transported to the time and place she lived. So this is the age of the lyric poets in ancient Greece.
Oh my god. I want to be transported there so bad.
You wouldn't understand what they're saying, though.
Damn, that's true. I'd need the TARDIS with me. To translate. That was so nerdy of me.
I know. This is a podcast called History for Weirdos, after all. So yes. I think you're forgiven.
I'm sure there's plenty of Whovians listening.
That's true. So this was a place and time that was honestly just steeped in culture, arts, music, and revolutionary ideas. This was kind of an exciting time to be Greek because Greece had just emerged from a quote-unquote dark age that had lasted for roughly 4 centuries.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so 400 years starting with...
The crisis of the 3rd century?
Nope.
The collapse of... No!
That was really bad.
The Bronze Age collapse.
The
Bronze Age collapse.
The Bronze Age collapse, yeah.
There were so many things that popped into my head at one time.
I know.
I short-circuited. Because you have like 3 different things that you're always referencing.
And that I just really nerd out about.
Yes, and they all popped in. But this is after the Bronze Age collapse, 400 years
after the Bronze Age collapse is when this period started, and then we're roughly 150 years past that.
Yeah, so they're out of that, not the dark ages, but it's a dark period.
It's a dark period.
And what is coming out of this sounds like a lot of art.
It's a revival.
Cool.
It's really cool. We're actually in a period of time called the Archaic Greek Age, or just Archaic Greece.
Okay.
And it's where we see the rise of the Greek polis, which is essentially the city-state. So Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Corinth, they're all city-states.
I remember learning about this in elementary school.
Isn't that cool?
I think 5th grade, maybe 6th grade. So like middle school for me.
I roughly remember that too, actually.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is so cool. And then when we got to Rome, it was like, there was Julius Caesar and Augustus, and that's about it. And I'm like,
that's all I remember too.
There's a lot more to that.
Did you know even at that age that there was a lot more?
Yes.
That wasn't being covered?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it was really upsetting, actually.
You were meant for this podcast.
It really was. So, okay, back to this though. And also, by the way, the Greek polis is really important because it really sets the foundation for the classical world, and that's what we essentially called, what we today refer to as like ancient Greece and Rome. Mm-hmm. It's really important. So, on one hand, we see the Greek world make significant advances in the archaic era. So, we have the introduction of the written language, which had disappeared in the Greek world for over 400 years.
That's nuts to think about.
It's insane. And the language that came after was completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different.
So people from this time period, from Sappho's time period, would not have been able to read things from before the Bronze Age collapse?
Correct. Yeah, the alphabet is completely different. And in fact, they don't really have an alphabet. The Mycenaean Greeks, which are the ones immediately before, they had a script called Linear B, which was almost like a mixture of like an alphabet with like pictograms or pictographs.
Okay.
Like cuneiform, I guess, technically.
Okay. But at this point, they have like an actual alphabet and written language.
Right. It's the same Greek alphabet that they have today.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So it comes from this time period. The Greek world was filled with just stirring music and sublime poetry at this time.
That sounds so nice.
It is, yeah. Homeric epics were being told, and the world was generally kind of just full of myth and magic, and especially with the tales of gods and goddesses.
Which we covered last week.
Yes, we did.
In our myth episode. Go check that out if you have not.
Yes.
After this one.
After this one, definitely. So that was on one hand. The other hand, though, this was a time of political instability. Athens was still over a century away from, quote unquote, creating democracy. Mm-hmm. And at best case, your city-state's government was either an oligarchy or you had a benevolent tyrant.
Nice.
So, and yes, it's actually during this time that the Greek word tyrannos comes from, which gave way to the English equivalent of tyrant.
I will say times of political instability tend to be the times of the best art.
I've heard that before, actually. Mm-hmm. And we do see some amazing art that comes out of this. So basically, violent overthrow of governments was just part and parcel of the time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you got to keep that in mind. So there's both good and bad. So now that we understand a little bit about this time, let's move on to the island of Lesbos, which is where Sappho is from. Mm-hmm. So it's an island located in the northeastern Aegean Sea. It's actually really close to Turkey in the present day.
Okay.
And it was renowned in the ancient world for its lyric poetry, which is an art form characterized by the personal expression of emotion in verse, set to like the strumming rhythms of a lyre, like Lyre, which is just
the
an
musical instrument, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, invented by the Greeks.
The lyre is associated with Apollo?
Yes, it is.
He plays the lyre?
Yeah, that's very impressive.
Well, thank you. I thank you.
So it's likely that this cultural environment was deeply influential in shaping Sappho as the legendary poet that we know her as today. Mm-hmm. And before we go into some of her accomplishments, let's look into a little about the very little that we know about her life. So we know that she was born circa 630 BC, but that isn't even known for certain.
Wow, so that's how little we know.
We know so little. The oldest surviving biography about her comes from the late 2nd, early 3rd century AD.
Oh, snap.
Which is roughly 800 years after her life.
Wow, that's nuts.
Right.
That's the earliest surviving one.
Exactly. And the one that references her the most is called the Suda, which is a Byzantine era biography, I think from the 8th century, I want to say.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's well over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
After her life.
Yeah, so at that point, it's hard to tell like what is biographical, what's myth.
Right. And in fact, the things that we know about her life, we actually have just surmised from her poems, from her works of art.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool though.
Yeah.
Kind of like a mystery.
Yeah, exactly. Like she would write about like this is what she experienced, and you're like, okay, well, I guess that's it.
Then this must be the time period that she's living in. Yeah.
Right. And up until the 19th century, and I'll get to that later on, most of the works that we knew about her came because other like either ancient or medieval people were writing, oh, this is what Sappho said. And so that's the only, and whatever they wrote down, that was like, okay, we have to take their word for it.
We have to assume that is what Sappho said.
Yeah.
We can't prove otherwise.
Because, we didn't have any other like written documents from her.
Okay, that's really
But
interesting.
I'll get to that at the end.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting stuff. So she was from the city of Mytilene, which exists today and is actually the capital of the island of Lesbos.
Oh, okay. What's it called?
Mytilene.
Mytilene.
And we think that she had 3 brothers, again, because she wrote about them. And one of them she wrote about the most often, so I'm guessing her favorite one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely her favorite brother.
I mean, this is how little we know about her life. Like, it is insane. So there is also one amusing anecdote about her life, and it's how she married a man, actually.
Okay.
So apparently she married a Cercolas of Andros, which probably wasn't real and is most likely an anachronistic joke.
Okay.
And
so
I'll
it's like
tell
an
you
inside
why.
joke.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Because this guy's name essentially translates to, and I apologize in advance, but language, dick of man.
Okay, so yeah, they're joking.
So it's like a very like it's basically like a guy's name, Richard being shortened to Dick.
Yeah.
And Andros, which like
means manly.
Manly, exactly. It's where my name Andrew comes from. Funny enough.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's why they called it Dick of Man.
Okay, so they're joking.
They're joking
about her husband. That does not sound like a real person.
No, this is most likely this was probably someone like Aristophanes in like classical Athens, like
kind of doing like a teasing joke.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
So
she may or may not have been married.
Yeah, and this joke to you listeners will make sense in a little bit if you're not already familiar with Sappho. But since this is a Pride episode, you can kind of probably connect the dots here
as to why that would be ironic.
She was most likely born into an aristocratic family, so she was able to have the time to be able to write and create her art.
Yes.
Isn't that funny
that stayed true?
That stays true even to this day, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be.
Not as much. I'd say we've democratized.
Society.
Society has democratized poetry very recently.
That's
in
true.
Very modern times, a lot of famous poetry does come from, like, quote unquote, like the working class person.
That's interesting. I was thinking more about art in general.
Art in general, yeah. To be a professional artist, you're right. In general, is a privilege, is an economic privilege,
right?
For sure. But the poets that we think of today, a lot of like the Romantic era poets, they were all just the sons and sometimes the daughters of aristocrats,
right?
And they didn't have anything to do, so they wrote poetry.
Man, sounds like kind of a great life, honestly.
That sounds like the best life.
It's like, for you, especially as a writer.
Yeah.
For me, not as a non-writer, I'm kind of like.
Or sometimes they became like historians.
See, that would be.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or they were really into music or science. Like they had you're supposed to have like a respectable hobby. Poetry. At least, again, in the Romantic period, was actually kind of seen as like a party boy hobby.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the punk rock of, of the 19th century.
Yeah. Do you think poetry would have been like a party girl hobby for Sappho?
It's really hard to say because we even like classical historians to this day have a trouble understanding archaic Greece because there's just not as much detail as we have like just a few hundred years later in the classical era, or especially in Hellenistic Greece, right? A lot more like sources, and we understand their society a lot better. This time it's still it's a little bit of a wild, wild west of our understanding, but I can say that probably helped. Being rich and coming from an aristocratic means definitely helped.
Yeah.
But I can't, I don't know if it was like the punk rock of her era.
I think poetry specifically gets associated or was associated with like partiers or something because it's very hedonistic. It's seen as very hedonistic poetry, or you have to really like revel in your senses.
Interesting.
It's very sensual in the meaning of the word of like, you gotta really enjoy the taste of things, the feel of things, right?
It's funny you say that because her poetry was meant to be listened to while there was like an instrument being played.
That's true. You're right with the lyre. So
yeah.
Yes, something indulgent.
Yes, it would be incredibly indulgent.
Yeah.
And we know she was good. And I'll get into that too. So, I mean, actually, I have a little snippet that I'll read in a little bit.
Oh, yay.
Because it is quite good.
Cocoa Beach is your ultimate Florida beach vacation. Pack your bags and open your mind. Adventure is calling from Orlando's closest beach. Cocoa Beach is Florida's secret gem that's got it all. It's the budget-friendly, retro-cool destination that families and surfers adore. Come soak up the sun and ride the East Coast's most famous waves. Start planning your one-of-a-kind getaway now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
Dan Mancini from Mama Mancini's. My grandmother cherished the family meal. It was a time to relax and enjoy a delicious, wholesome dinner together. It's our mission to deliver authentic Italian recipes made with the same real ingredients my grandmother used. Mama Mancini's classic Italian meatballs and slow-cooked sauce is available in the deli department at your local Publix and supermarkets across the country. Fully cooked and ready to serve, just heat and eat. Visit MamaMancini's.com to find the closest store near you.
So, speaking of her art, the island of Lesbos was noted for its school of women poets. And I don't want you guys to think like a school as in like, you know, a school. It's more of like a school of thought.
Okay.
It just happened to be a lot of them, you know, were there.
A lot of women poets, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a cultural thing almost.
Yeah, and I think they probably got together and stuff, I'm guessing. But like, the only reason I say this is because it was a unique phenomenon in a very patriarchal society that for the most part restricted women's roles and voices. Like, you know, like after all, this is a broad stroke, but women in ancient Greece were considered property of men.
Yes.
You know, Sparta is funny enough, is actually an example of this not being the case, but that is outside the norm.
Yes.
The norm is you're either the property of your husband or your father.
And I've heard, I think we've discussed this before, and I've read this, like women in ancient Greece really did very little outside the home.
That's correct.
They had very limited social lives. Their life was the home.
Even like Roman women had a lot more freedom and autonomy generally.
Yeah.
Like again, these are very broad strokes that I'm saying here, but yes.
So interesting. Very interesting that there was on this island just women doing one of the most like freeing things ever, which is just making art for the sake of making art.
It's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
So this school of thought attracted young women from all across Greece. So they came to learn and imbibe not only like poetry, but also music, dance, and you know, perhaps like the ways of, you know, love and passion that were very evident in Sappho's verses.
Yep.
In fact, you know, this is where I wanted to read a little bit of her poetry. It's a snippet of her work from a poem titled "A Hymn to Venus."
Ooh.
Yes.
This is the goddess of love.
The goddess of love. And also remember when we covered Enheduanna?
Yes.
Her poems were also like a hymn to Enlil or you know, whatever the Sumerian god or goddess was.
Yes, I remember that.
So I thought that was really interesting. And you know, we're separated here by like 1600 years, roughly speaking. So it's, you know, it's a long time. So here we go. O Venus, beauty of the skies, to whom 1,000 temples rise, gaily false and gentle smiles, full of love perplexing wiles. O goddess, from my heart remove the wasting cares and pains of love. If thou hast kindly heard a song in soft distress preferred, propitious to my tuneful vow, a gentle goddess, hear me now.
Oh my god.
Really good, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, you know, anglicized, right?
Yes.
And I don't know ancient Greek, guys, so I couldn't
You
say
didn't
it.
translate this yourself?
I did not.
I'm shocked.
Shocked.
That's beautiful, though. It sounds like a song and a prayer.
It does, right? Mm-hmm. And also, I really hate whoever made this translation, because they use the word propitious, and it's like, I read that and I was like, I practiced saying that word beforehand and I still messed it up.
That's okay. I thought you did beautifully.
Thank you. So for me, like, Sappho's poetry just really provides, I think, a window into her soul, and maybe like even just some broad personas of the time.
Right.
And it reveals, specifically about her, like a woman with a deep appreciation of arts and culture.
Definitely.
And even just from those verses alone, I got that.
I could see that being a really popular poem because it's about heartache and asking Venus to take it away from you. Like, who at some point in their life can't relate to that?
Exactly.
Very, very relatable.
It is so relatable even to this day. Like,
yes.
What, 2,600 years later, roughly?
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So here we get into, why we know about Sappho, and a little bit about, like debates that have been raging for millennia. But, she had a special bond with her female students, right? She often expresses in her poems deep affection, admiration, and love. So again, this has led to intense scholarly discussion over centuries now about Sappho's personal life, her sexuality, giving her a symbolic status symbol in the history of female homosexuality, and even lending her name to the terms lesbian and sapphic. Like, they come from her.
Right, because she was from Lesbos and her name was, Sappho.
Yeah, and so, like, technically today, if you're from the island of Lesbos, you are a lesbian, right? Even if you're a man. But obviously in, like, culture, like, that
means a woman who loves a woman.
Exactly. And that comes from Sappho because she's from the island of Lesbos.
That's so nuts to think that your name and existence could have an impact on, like, sexuality.
Yeah, like
how people
thousands of years in the future.
And for people to still be debating over your personal life, like that's another flex in and of itself. Like, wow, they're so obsessed with me. They're still trying to figure it out.
Exactly. And I also have to give a little disclaimer, too, that, like, sexuality in the ancient world isn't as cut and dry as it is today. I feel like today we're almost, like, going back to that.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
agree.
Things are, like, more on a spectrum, and things aren't black and white. And that certainly was the case in ancient Greece. There wasn't really a term for... There was sort of like a term for female homosexuality, but like male homosexuality was not really a thing.
Right, because it was just seen as sexuality.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And even today, I like to read romance novels sometimes. Mm-hmm. Good ones. I don't like cheesy ones. But even today...
I'm glad you told that to the weirdos.
Yeah, don't worry, weirdos. No, sometimes I do like cheesy ones if it's like a Christmas romance.
Yeah, you do like the Hallmark ones, babe.
Oh, no, I mean books.
Oh, yeah, the versions,
books.
yeah.
Yeah. They will refer to it as a sapphic romance novel if the two romantic leads are both female.
Yeah.
So that comes from Sappho.
It comes from Sappho, yeah.
Nuts.
She pretty impressive person.
Yes.
Especially for someone who we know, like, almost nothing about.
That's another really good point. For someone that is so mysterious, she has left quite an impression on, like, identity and poetry and art. That's so cool.
Yeah, we think she might have had a child at one point. We're not sure. Like, wow. we don't even know her dad's name at all. We think we might know her mother's name. Like, it's like really, we know very little.
That's also so interesting because how you were sharing that women were seen as either the property of their father or their husband. For us to not be certain of either of those things for her.
Right.
She really stands out on her own.
She does. She absolutely does.
Which is so rare for a woman of her time.
And she stood out, like, throughout different eras. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But it's pretty impressive. So one of the things we do know about her life is this. Like, she did live in a time of great political upheaval. Mm. And so we know that at some point around the year 600 BC... Mm-hmm. She was caught in, like, this intricate dance of political alliances and rivalries and power politics plays. And she was caught up in this, we think. We just have surmised this. And she was exiled to Sicily around this time.
That's a pretty dope place to be exiled.
Right? It's like, okay, exiled me to Sicily.
Oh no.
And, and by the way, Sicily at this time had been, colonized by
Everybody.
numerous Greeks. Well, no, this time it was just the Greeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Romans are still, aren't really a thing yet. It's really just the Greeks at this point.
Okay.
So
she has to leave her home, though.
She does.
She has to leave her home and go to a different island.
Right, and remember, Lesbos is right off the coast of modern day Turkey, right? Asia Minor, and so she has to go all the way across the Aegean.
Yeah.
Far away to Italy.
Where she has, like you said, she has a community, like this school of poetry with the women and everything. That would be a big loss for her.
It would. So, despite this, though, she did continue to write, pouring her experiences, hopes, fears, and passions into her verses.
That's right, Sappho.
Yeah, so she continued to do it, I mean, her contribution to literature in general is incredible. I mean, she pioneered this kind of unique meter known as the Sapphic stanza, which is a lyrical verse, I think, consisting of 4 lines with 3 having 11 syllables and 4th 5.
Wow.
This one I had to really dig deep for. Mm-hmm. So the mechanics of poetry honestly go a little over my head, but that was I think the most
that made sense to me.
Straightforward way of saying it. Yeah.
That made sense to me. Which is interesting because I never learned that when studying poetry and stuff. We always learn about these different styles of doing stanzas, and a lot of them do involve syllables or rhyming. But all of the different styles I can think of were credited to men.
Yeah. The only one I can think of at the top of my head is iambic pentameter from Shakespeare. And I don't even know if he created it.
I'm pretty sure... Ooh, I don't know, actually.
And I don't even know what it is.
He's known for him. He's known for it.
Exactly.
But I don't know if he created it.
But basically, this meter that she created has been used and admired for millennia. And it's really, I think that's impressive, right? The actual, structural,
her contribution to her art. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's important. But I think, honestly, what really moves me more is her themes revolving around love and passion, longing and loss, the ephemeral beauty of youth, right? Sorrows of aging, and just the simple joys of life. Those are just profoundly human emotions.
That's something all of us go through.
Right.
Love, loss,
aging
and being sad about it, remembering how cool it is to be young and beautiful.
Right. It is it's just remarkable how relatable it is.
Even today, when our world looks so different from hers.
She would have a heart attack looking at today's world, right? And we would be horrified of their daily life, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure that would not be fun for us either.
Yeah, even as someone who just loves ancient Greece and ancient Rome, I would be horrified to actually live in that time.
Yeah.
I would want to visit. I wouldn't want to live.
Right. And visit with the TARDIS so you could understand everything.
Exactly, yeah.
And then fly away in your police box.
Exactly. Thank you. So, though her words, you can perceive an intensity of feeling and a depth of insight, they are just universally relatable and timeless. I have to just say that because it's so amazing. So her works were so esteemed that they were gathered in 9 volumes and were prominently featured in the Great Library of Alexandria, right?
So badass.
And she was considered the 10th muse by her contemporaries and those that followed in the classical and Hellenistic ages.
Wow, that's a big compliment.
That's a huge compliment, guys. So if you guys don't know, there were 9 muses in ancient Greek mythology that kind of just, I don't know how to describe it, but basically influenced all of art.
Yeah, they're these divine
beings, right?
And they each relate to a different type of art or form of inspiration.
Yes, exactly. And by calling Sappho the 10th muse, they were essentially placing her on this massive pedestal, equating her to literal divine beings.
Yeah.
That's not something they did lightly back then.
Right. Because they believed in that stuff. It wasn't just
exactly.
These are myths for fun. This is a cute thing to call you.
No, they are actually saying you're basically like a god.
That's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's even even Alexander wasn't considered a god in his time. They called him, Alexander Magnos, like the Great. That's why we call him the Great, because the ancient Greeks called him that. They didn't call him a god.
Right. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So, not everyone in the ancient world, though, was a fan of hers. I had to really kind of try to find a critic. There was, of course, it was Roman.
Of course.
So Quintus Horatius Flaccus, or simply just known as Horace, in English.
I've heard of Horace.
Yeah, he's pretty famous himself. He was an esteemed poet from like the age of Augustus. So this is centuries later, right? And he basically just criticized her for being too masculine.
Ew, Horace.
Yeah.
What a lame criticism.
And it's either because he viewed poetry as a profession for men and only men,
right?
Or because she was a female homosexual in his eyes,
and he had a bias against that.
Exactly.
Right. So it's not coming from a good place. It's not coming from like a.
I mean, I think he was being pretty reasonable.
Wow, Horace.
Yeah, I was like, man, Horace, come on. I mean, Ovid, which is a contemporary of Horace, was a huge fan. So
there you go.
Yeah.
That's right, Ovid.
But her critics were far and few in number from what I guess I can tell. But, much like the literature of her time, they did not entirely survive the ages, sadly.
Her poems?
Yes. I mean, today we only have like a fragmentary collection of her works, just a mere echo of what was written. So that, to put in percentages, I think it's roughly like 6% of her works are accounted for in the present day.
6%?
6%.
That's a lot that's lost. That's nuts.
Yeah. So we think she wrote like roughly probably 10,000 lines in her day.
Oh my gosh.
And we only have like 600 of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That hurts my heart.
Or like 650 maybe. Yeah, it's really, really low. So in fact, actually, if it weren't for a chanced find in Fayum, Egypt, which is way south of Alexandria.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that.
It's actually, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. There's been amazing art that's been found from the Roman era.
Really?
So much later, yeah, of like mummy portraits. And it's really interesting to see what did like Roman Egyptians look like. And they kind of were they looked, it's like the rainbow.
That's really cool to think about.
Yeah.
Mummy portraits.
Yeah, mummy portraits, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, Fayum is famous for those. Yeah, and specifically from the Roman era. So yeah, if it wasn't for a chance find in Fayum by these two British archaeologists, or Egyptologists, Bernard Grenfell and Arthur Hunt in the late 19th century, almost none of her works would have been found.
Wow.
In fact, actually, the latest discovery of a poem of hers is less than 10 years old.
Oh my gosh.
It's in 2014.
That's recent.
Yeah.
They're still finding her stuff.
Exactly. And they found, it was just scraps of papyrus that had been just happened to be preserved, and were essentially in a a garbage ditch.
Shut
like
up.
an ancient equivalent of a garbage ditch.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's not wild.
Also, imagine just finding that and being like, me, if I'd be like, I wonder what this says. I don't know.
To them, it was just like extra scraps of paper, but for us, it's literally priceless.
Right. That's incredible.
I know. It's so cool. I'm really hoping that we end up finding more, but nevertheless, these fragments just continue to, move and inspire us.
Definitely.
And I think she's an amazing model for a weirdo.
Yeah, definitely.
We don't know how she died, but an anachronistic story much, much later, we think, probably in the time of the Romans or Hellenistic Greeks, we think that, according to legend, right, she jumped off a cliff because she was sad that the ferryman to the underworld, Phaon, or one of the ferrymen, didn't love her back, which is obviously...
I'm going to call BS.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say it's BS.
I'm going to say that's not how she died.
I didn't even put it in my notes because that was so dumb.
Why would anyone think that?
Yeah.
But she's, I've known, even before being influenced by you and your love of ancient Greece, I've known of Sappho for so long. She's a big feminist icon.
She is, yes.
She's a big queer icon, big literary icon. She's, regardless of who she was, what she represents means a lot to a lot of people.
It's true. So, In conclusion, Sappho of Lesbos, she stands as this monumental figure in world literature and just honestly of like the history of human expression, in my opinion.
Definitely.
I mean, the world of ancient Greece, where, the muses sang, like Sappho, this 10th muse, danced to the rhythm of her own lyre.
Yeah, that's right. I love that.
Her voice was, unique and bold and continues just to reverberate across the millennia. Which I think bears testimony to her remarkable life, her profound talent, and her enduring legacy.
That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I think so. And that, my dear weirdos, is the legacy and the very little we know about her life.
That's still so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. You taught me a lot about Sappho that I didn't know.
Thank you.
Again, I kind of more so knew about her as like the icon.
Right.
Or like almost like a mythical figure.
I mean, she was like a mythical figure even to the ancient Greeks.
Yeah.
That followed her in like the classical and especially the Hellenistic age.
Right. It's just cool to learn a little bit more about her and the world that she lived in.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And so sources for this week's episode come from the Poetry Foundation.
Very good website. You can find basically like any poem on there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I use them actually quite a bit. So they were really helpful. The Conversation, The New Yorker, and of course, my favorite, Wikipedia.
Yay! Thank you so much, babe, for telling us about Sappho. I love that so much. And
yeah.
Thank you, weirdos, for listening to another episode with us. Before we say goodbye, we have a reminder. What is that reminder, babe?
Well, this reminder is that we have a trip to Italy.
No big deal.
No big deal. And there are still spots available. So please, if you haven't done so already, book that trip.
Yes.
And you only need to put down 25%. And you have you don't have to pay any interest up until, I think, January, 90 days before we leave.
Right.
Just January, like mid-January at some point.
So now is still a really good time to book, essentially, because you have plenty of time to make off payments. You don't have to pay it all at once. You could just reserve your spot. And then next spring, you could be hanging with us in Florence and Rome.
I'm pretty stoked on this.
Yeah, please book your spots. We are so excited to get to know the weirdos that join us there.
Yes. Well, weirdos, until next time.
Until next time, weirdos.
Adios.
Cocoa Beach is your ultimate Florida beach vacation. Pack your bags and open your mind. Adventure is calling from Orlando's closest beach. Cocoa Beach is Florida's secret gem that's got it all. It's the budget-friendly, retro-cool destination that families and surfers adore. Come soak up the sun and ride the East Coast's most famous waves. Start planning your one-of-a-kind getaway now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
You probably know the feeling. Sweaty, fast breathing, quick heart rate. That's a cortisol spike. It feels awful, and its imbalance is the cause of your anxiety. Rebalance Health's 3-part anxiety system helps address it at the root. Rebalance Health lozenges are natural and designed for optimal absorption, providing 24-hour relief. Live life fully without feeling like you're fighting for it. Get 50% off your first month with code CALM23 at rebalancehealth.com.